So still with X-Plane 11 for the moment, and also still in the RW Designs Twin Otter. That will change very soon. I've just bought the Coronado Beechcraft Baron 58, which is going to be my new aircraft of choice for now, well, in X-Plane 11. And one of the reasons for choosing that aircraft is I'm going to buy the REP Reality Expansion Pack, which substantially increases the simulation value, if you like, of that aircraft. And of course, one of the other reasons for choosing the Beech Baron is that, conveniently enough, Air Manager comes with a fairly comprehensive Baron 2D cockpit, which I can just use pretty much out of the box. And also I just discovered that Russ at Sim Innovations is working on an enhanced version of that, which is going to, I think, require Air Manager version 3, which is not out yet, but it's not too far off. And I think Russ said that somebody else is working on a Baron panel as well for Air Manager, so we should be well served for the Beech Baron. So that's to come. I've just installed that, I haven't even run it yet, but we'll be having a look at that. The other thing you may or may not be able to tell from looking behind me is I have a Payware airfield installed. This is a CYBD Bella Coola in British Columbia, and I've just tried that for the first time. It's pretty good. I'll give you a look at that in a while. And this is sitting on top of the, as I demonstrated in an earlier video, the HD mesh, I forget the name of that product, but the freeware mesh and texture product. I've installed the tile for British Columbia, and so the Payware sits on top of, rather in the manner of an Orbix scenery, an area of photos scenery, and so that in turn sits on top of the HD mesh scenery. That's pretty good scenery, the free HD mesh scenery, and I think it's on a par with the Orbix FTX Global. You know, maybe not quite up there, but it's just streets ahead of certainly the default FSX scenery, and I think it's an improvement as well, certainly in terms of the mesh quality over the default X-Plane 11 mesh. So the other major news about X-Plane 11 for me is I think I've got a handle on the performance. You might recall in my previous videos I've been reporting something like 17 frames per second, which, although it's kind of smooth, you know, it seems smoother than FSX at 17 frames per second, it's still not that smooth. And even when I was able to get higher frames than that, I was getting these little pauses, quite large pauses actually, you know, kind of maybe quarter of second pauses and so on. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I've figured out that pretty much the only thing that really impacts that is the anti-aliasing. So although I can run at fairly high anti-aliasing settings and it'll look great and the performance is superficially pretty good, I get those pauses, and the only way I can cure that is to go down to FXAA, which is the second, well actually it's the lowest anti-aliasing available in X-Plane. The only thing lower is off. so FXAA is what you see behind me. Now it's going to be difficult for you to see this on the video. FXAA, you may or may not know, stands for, I think, Fast Approximate Anti-Aliasing. It's a very crude anti-aliasing algorithm, and it, you know, it smooths out the jaggies, but you do get quite a lot of shimmering in the scenery. But it's the best compromise that I've got at the moment with my current setup, and it's definitely flyable. And we don't get, touch wood, we don't get any of those horrible pauses, and the frames are pretty much 30 and above. It varies between kind of 30 and 32 generally, and it dips to the mid-20s, and that's with weather as well, which I think is pretty, you know, acceptable frame rates. The next thing to try, there's another engineering feat I think going to be required. You may remember I've talked about the field of view, and I still have the X-Plane 3-screen, 3 individual views set up, so we're not getting that super stretchy display, and that, again, that works fine. You know, all the performance things I've just said apply to this setup, but everything is still too big, and that's because I've got, you'll recall, 120 degree setup in what's displayed, whereas the actual field of view is more like 150 degrees. Now the problem is, I'll try and show you this in just a second. If I set that up to be 150 degrees, let's say, by using 3 independent 50 degree views, it doesn't look right. And the reason it doesn't look right is at the joins here we get this kind of, instead of the continuity between, let's say, the glare shield, we get this sort of reverse kink, is the only way I can describe it. And that's because the outside monitors are not angled inward sufficiently. If they're angled inward sufficiently, that kink would even itself out. From the pilot seat, this is. So all I've got to do is, you may say, all I've got to do is move the, change the angle of the screens. The problem with that is it's not physically possible to do that at the moment, because the outside edges of my instrument panel are in the way. They're perilously close to the LCD screen surface at the moment, and I simply can't move the angle in any further. I'm going to have to remedy that, and the only way to do that, there's kind of 2 ways to go about remedying this problem, each of course incurring the next round of problems. The most satisfactory way to do this in a lot of ways would be to throw away these 32-inch screens and get bigger ones. Perhaps, if we're going to stick with 1080p screens, I don't want to go too much bigger than 32, but possibly 37-inch screens. That would allow the joins to be further apart, which in turn would allow the angle of the outside monitors to be more acute, and somewhere in there perhaps moving the monitors back slightly as well, which would, that's a multi-dimensional set of changes that interact in all sorts of different ways. I think that will give me, without too much of a decrease in the number of pixels per inch, that would give me a better angle, and hence it will allow me to set the field of view correctly, which, if you track it all the way back, would mean that the screen wouldn't look quite so zoomed in. Everything looks a little bit too much larger than life at the moment. Now of course, just junking these screens, that's quite a few hundreds of pounds to recoup, and then to purchase 3 extra screens, it's same deal again in the other direction. Then of course we've got this problem of they won't fit in this gap, and we're back to just the things need to be moved upwards and so on. So I'm not going to do that for now. These screens are pretty much satisfactory as they are. The other option is to try and saw off the corners somehow of the instrument panel. That will give me some scope for changing the angle inward slightly. I'm not sure how much scope. I think it might be enough to compensate for that extra tilt, just to get rid of that kink if I go to 150 degrees field of view. So that'll require a little bit of engineering. That's probably the thing I'm going to try and do next. I think before I do that, I'm just going to continue to tinker with the software. Just coming back to the new scenery, I've installed this Bella Cooler airport. I was looking for small Payware airports in X-Plane 11, and there aren't many, to be honest, and I stumbled across these ones. They're from a vendor called Betty X or something, I don't know how you pronounce that. And there's 2 Canadian airports, Bella Cooler and CZST Stewart, and they were great looking airports. They were the best small airports I could find. I haven't bought Stewart yet, but I may do that because they're about 250 miles apart, and it'd be nice to fly between them over this HD mesh scenery I've talked about. Now the other thing that's interesting is I certainly have Stewart in FSX. I had to check, I've actually got Bella Cooler as well, although I've never installed that. That incidentally is one of the reasons I'm pretty much not going to buy anything in the current Orbix sale. I've got so much on my hard drive which I've bought in previous Orbix sales, and I haven't even got around to installing it. But what it does mean is I can install Bella Cooler and Stuart in FSX as well as X-Plane, and then I can compare, you know, pretty much like for like flying between the two of them. And that's just interesting. I mean, I may or may not do that on video, but it's just interesting to try, you know, to get a handle on. I think people have misunderstood why I did the scenery comparisons previously between X-Plane and FSX. I'm not trying to suggest one's any better than the other. I'm just comparing them because it's interesting to do that. You know, it's sort of FSX, having played with that for 7 or 8 years, that's a baseline against which to measure X-Plane 11. And I'm not really bothered which is better, except to the extent that I want to eventually look for a sim to just settle down with, you know, which is going to give me the best compromise between fidelity of simulation in every respect and quality of scenery. And then the last thing I'll just say in terms of those things I've just talked about is, since my last video, you know, the playing field has changed quite a lot, and it really calls into question whether I'll stick with X-Plane 11 or not. And the two significant, well, the really one significant and one slightly interesting thing that's happened since my last video is, first of all, Flight Sim World by Dovetail Games has finally been released. Well, it's kind of been released. It's an early access / beta version, and the big thing about that is it's a 64-bit simulator. Now, I have downloaded that and had a play with it. There's a few reasons why I haven't persisted with that just for now. Mainly, I couldn't get the bloody elevator trim to work at all, which meant it was a real pain just to fly along in a straight line without holding the yoke forward. So I'll figure that out and then I'll go back and have a go with that. But the other major thing that's happened in the last few days is Prepared version 4 finally has been announced. That's coming out in about 3 days' time on the 30th of May, and that is really going to be a game changer for me potentially. I've held off, you know, I did have Prepared version 1.4 at one point, but I've held off getting the later versions for now until it really shook itself out and became a definitively worthy simulator. Version 4, again, as everyone expected, has announced itself as a 64-bit simulator, and that really is, you know, going to be essential for the future of any simulator I choose. So we'll be getting that, no doubt. I'm not going to get it on the day it's issued. I'll hold off for a while and, you know, see how it plays out in how people feedback on it. But really, going forward, the choices are going to come down to X-Plane 11 versus Prepared version 4. And Prepared, you know, it's pretty far ahead of the game in terms of investment, because it looks like all the Orbix scenery certainly is going to port across to that at no extra cost, and it may be that many of the aircraft add-ons will be updated in due course at minimal cost or possibly no cost. Now, that said, I don't have any first-hand experience of any of the later Prepared versions, so, you know, I have to try it first-hand really to get a handle on, you know, some of the things about X-Plane that I like at the moment are, apart from somehow just the look and feel of the lighting and so on seems much more authentic, things like the level of detail radius, there doesn't seem to be such a concept in X-Plane. So, you know, the scenery is sharp, way off into the distance. We don't have any of this business of the textures blurring and lagging behind as we have in FSX and as we probably have in Prepared, since it's based on the same underlying engine. So that's coming soon. Expect to see perhaps some videos featuring Prepared version 4 in the next month, or, well, a couple of months, let's say. There's some other things on the horizon which are going to intervene before I get around to doing that, and I don't mean Flight Sim World either. One final heads up, I've been struggling to film this new super wide display. One of the things that I'm probably going to do, well, it's pretty close to definite that I will do this. I'm not sure what the timescale is going to be. I'm going to take out this whole throttle quad and the box that it's mounted on and replace that probably with a virtual fly TQ6 at some point. Now I had decided to mount the TQ6 upside down here, so it's somewhat in the manner of the Twin Otter, and just accept the fact that the order of the levers is going to be reversed because of the way that's constructed. But actually I've decided I'm going to mount the TQ6, which I haven't bought one yet, but when I do, I'm going to mount it low down in the manner more of a Beechcraft aircraft, and just accept that there's a compromise to realism there for flying the Twin Otter. I'm going to have to find a way of doing that, which I haven't figured out yet. But that's going to free up this whole area, and we're not going to get this ridiculous tap dance where I'm trying to film and then my arms obscuring the bulk of the runway because I'm holding the throttles. So that's just another medium to long term change that's going to happen to the cockpit. So that's it for now. Look out next time maybe for a glimpse at the new Coronado Baron, and perhaps I'll do a flight around Bella Coola to show off this scenery. In fact, I'll probably just do a quick trip round in the Twin Otter now to round this one off, give you a look at it. Okay, we'll just do a very quick and dirty takeoff round the block and land again. It's kind of windy. We're going to be taking off with a tailwind from this end, but never mind. We can manage. So if we take off from this end, we'll just do a 180 and land again or something like that. Then at least we'll be landing into wind. So this is Bella Coola, X-Plane 11. Very nice runway texture there. Very Orbix-like scenery here. Not quite, but you know, it's in the ballpark. Lots and lots of autogen. Much more than I typically have in FSX. Whoops. Alright. No prizes for guessing what was happening there. So here we are, complex scenery, 29 frames per second indicated, lots and lots of trees there. We've got a haze going with the weather. Really nice haze actually. I'm assuming this is a feature of X-Plane's weather depiction, or perhaps of SkyMax Pro, which I've installed. So we'll keep it low. This is 50 centimeters per pixel off the airfield. On the airfield we've got some insane texture resolution which you can't even remember, 2 centimeters per pixel or something. I'm not sure if I have to do anything to benefit from that. So again, this is superior quality scenery. Okay, let's just hook a quick 180 and put it back down. Try and do a level turn here. Didn't come off the power now. very nice river scenery, and the margins of the river are done well. That's early evening sunlight, late evening in fact. And we're getting those nice cockpit shadows. And this is really beautifully smooth, even with all these trees around. No stuttering. I need to pay attention to my flying, sorry. Okay. When in doubt, take your hands off and wait a minute. So I don't know if you can see on the video, we are getting shimmering on those fences from this low overhead anti-aliasing. But it's very acceptable, I think, as a compromise. You know, the smoothness definitely makes up for that. I suppose it's more of a pain when you're actually on the airfield than when you're flying over it. Well, here's a bit of this scenery. Really looks quite nice. I think there's a 3D vehicles modelled over there. We've certainly got some 3D static aircraft. Got some people there. These markings on the ground, you can see they're kind of broken up because of the anti-aliasing. But to compromise at the end of the day. Okay, there we go.